My daughter ignored my pain to ask me for money. I turned her $20,000 ask into a $6.7 million portfolio and left for Paris. I never thought a mother's love came with an expiration date. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd share. And if, for a single second, you feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Helen Peterson. I'm 64 years old, and for my entire life, I've lived in the same neighborhood in Pasadena, California. This March morning, as the sun filtered through the lace curtains I embroidered 20 years ago, I woke up with that familiar weight on my chest that had become part of my daily routine. My arthritic hands fumbled for the pills on the nightstand, for my blood pressure, for the aches, for the heart that lately raced for no apparent reason. The beige wool cardigan I put on that morning smelled of mothballs and the years it had spent tucked away in the same drawer. My plush slippers shuffled against the linoleum floor as I walked to the kitchen, where the usual ritual awaited me. Drip coffee in the old machine, toast warming in the toaster, and that sense of emptiness that had settled into my home since my husband passed away 5 years ago. The 2-story house where I raised Jessica, my only daughter, still held every photograph, every memory, every corner filled with echoes of when we were a complete family. The salmon pink walls I had painted with such love now seemed like silent witnesses to conversations that no longer happened, to laughter that had faded, to hugs that had become mechanical and cold. That morning, as I stirred my coffee with a spoon that had belonged to my mother, my phone rang. It was Jessica. My heart, as always, leaped with the hope of hearing something in her voice that resembled the affection she used to have for me as a child. "Mom, I need to talk to you. It's urgent." Her tone was blunt, direct, without the, "How are you this morning?" that I longed to hear, without asking about my back pain that got worse every day, without showing any interest in the doctor's appointment I had that afternoon, which had kept me anxious for a week. "Of course, honey. Is everything okay? Are the kids all right?" "The kids are fine. It's something else. I need money. It's $20,000. I need it by Friday." The coffee cup grew cold in my hands. $20,000. A sum that represented months of my Social Security checks, the savings I had scraped together penny by penny over the years. Selling pies at the weekend farmers market, sewing alterations for neighbors late into the night. "What do you need it for, sweetie? Does it matter? You always tell me I can count on you for anything. Well, right now, I need this." In the background, I could hear the television, the laughter of her children playing, the normal life of a family that had moved on while I remained frozen in time, waiting for visits that became less frequent, for calls that grew scarcer, and always came with a request attached. That afternoon, in the waiting room of the medical clinic on Wilshire Boulevard, smelling of disinfectant and the constant murmur of sick people waiting for their turn, I received news that shattered my soul. Dr. Ramirez, an older man with thick glasses and gentle hands, gave me the results with the delicacy of someone who has delivered bad news for decades. "Mrs. Peterson, the tests confirm what we suspected. It's the beginning of cognitive decline. It's not severe yet, but we need to monitor the situation closely. It's important that you have family support, that you don't feel alone in this process." The words floated in the air like smoke that wouldn't dissipate. Cognitive decline, the same words that had marked the final years of my mother's life, as she slowly forgot us. Her own history, who she was. I left the office with trembling legs, clutching the worn leather purse that had been a wedding gift 40 years ago. On the bus ride home, watching the familiar streets of my beloved Pasadena pass by, Brookside Park, where I used to take Jessica as a child, St. James's Church, where I had her baptized, the corner bakery where they still know me by name, I could only think of one thing. I needed to tell my daughter what was happening. I got home as the sunset painted the kitchen walls orange. Jessica was sitting at the dining room table, scrolling through her phone with that look of impatience I had learned to recognize all too well. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against the wooden table that had belonged to my grandmother. "So, do you have an answer about the money?" There was no, "How did the doctors go?" There was no glance at my eyes, swollen from crying silently on the way home. Just the question I expected, as direct as a slap. "Jessica, I need to tell you something important. I just came from the doctor and..." Oh, Mom, not with the medical drama again. It's always something with you. First this hurts, then that hurts. You sound like a broken record. Can you just focus on what I'm asking? Yes or no? I was speechless. The words I had rehearsed during the entire trip home got stuck in my throat like a knot that kept me from breathing. My daughter, the little girl I had held in my arms for entire nights when she had a fever, the teenager I had accompanied to all her school plays, the young woman for whom I had worked 3 jobs to pay for her college, saw me as an obstacle between her and what she needed. It's just, the money you're asking for is almost everything I have saved, honey. So, what are you going to do with that much money at your age? Better to give it to me. I'll actually put it to good use. That night, after Jessica left without so much as a goodbye, I sat in my wicker rocking chair in the backyard, surrounded by the scent of the hibiscus flowers I had planted years ago. The full moon illuminated my small garden where the herbs I used for cooking still grew: mint, rosemary, basil. For the first time in my life as a mother, I wondered if I had raised a stranger. The following days dragged on like open wounds. Every morning, as I prepared my frugal breakfast, a scrambled egg, leftover beans from the pot that lasted all week, and a slice of toast, my mind obsessively returned to that conversation. Jessica's words echoed in my head like a funeral toll. What are you going to do with that much money at your age? I sat on my bed and went through the papers I kept in a shoebox under the mattress. There they were, all the receipts of what had been my entire life of sacrifices for her. Tuition receipts from the private school I enrolled her in because I wanted her to have better opportunities than I did. Invoices from the orthodontist when she needed braces at 14. Receipts for English lessons, computer classes, guitar lessons she never finished but that I kept paying for, hoping she would find her passion. I found the receipt for her Sweet 16 dress. $1,500 that I didn't have, but that I managed to get by selling the jewelry my late husband had given me. Jessica wanted to be the most beautiful girl at the party, and I, as always, moved heaven and earth to give it to her. I worked double shifts at the textile factory for 3 months, coming home with my fingers swollen from operating the machines, but with the satisfaction of seeing her smile when she tried on that pink dress that shimmered like a dream. There was also the receipt for the bail bond when her college boyfriend got into legal trouble. $5,000 that I took from my savings account without a second thought, because Jessica came home crying, saying that if we didn't help him, he'd be in serious trouble. He's the love of my life, Mom. I can't live without him, she had told me with tears that seemed so genuine. 2 months later, they broke up, and we never spoke of the money again. And then there was the thickest folder. All the receipts from when her first son, Sam, was born. The C-section at a private hospital because the public one was no place for her grandson. The expenses for the crib, the imported stroller, the designer baby clothes she insisted on buying. I want my son to have the best from day one, Jessica would say. And I, who had raised my daughter with cloth diapers I washed by hand and hand-me-down clothes from cousins, emptied my wallet once more. When her second child, Sophie, was born, the story repeated itself. More expenses, more needs, that somehow always ended up being my responsibility. It's just that you know how to work magic with money, Mom. I don't know how to budget like you do. I remembered that time, 2 years ago, when Jessica came to me in tears because she was 3 months behind on her credit card payment. They're going to sue me, Mom. They're going to foreclose on the house. The kids will be out on the street. $3,500 left my account that same afternoon. I'll pay you back, a little at a time, I promise, she had said. The first little bit never arrived. But what hurt the most weren't the numbers on those yellowing papers. It was remembering my own life on hold. When Jessica was 12 and wanted to take dance classes, I quit the baking classes I loved so much to pay for hers. When she turned 16 and needed money for the senior trip, I canceled the dental work I had been postponing for years. My cavities could wait. Her happiness could not. Even when I was diagnosed with uterine fibroids at 45, I postponed the surgery because Jessica was about to start college, and we needed every penny for tuition. I lived with sharp pains for years, taking cheap painkillers while she studied for a marketing degree she never used professionally. My sister Sarah, who lives in Phoenix, had warned me so many times over the phone, "Helen, that girl is bleeding you dry. She's going to leave you with nothing." but I always defended her. She's my daughter, Sarah. She's all I have in this world. The irony hit me like a cold slap that April morning as I organized those paper memories. I had invested every dollar, every hour, every tear into making Jessica the woman who now saw me as a walking ATM. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was her. Mom, have you decided about the money? Because I need an answer. I don't have all day. Jessica, could we talk in person? I'd like you to see something. See what? Oh, Mom, don't make me waste my time. Just tell me yes or no. It's just that I'd like to understand why you need so much money. It's a very large amount and, you know what? Forget it. I'll ask my mother-in-law. She actually understands when something is urgent. And she hung up. I stood there with the phone in my hand, listening to the dial tone as if it were the sound of my own death. Her mother-in-law, a woman who had known Jessica for barely 6 years, but who apparently was more valuable to her than I was. I, who had carried her in my womb, who had slept by her side when she had nightmares, who had worked until my hands bled to give her everything she asked for. That afternoon, while I was watering the plants in the yard with water I reused from washing dishes, my neighbor Louise came over. Louise had been my confidant for years, the only person who knew how much Jessica's attitude hurt me. Can you believe she'd rather ask her mother-in-law than explain to me what she needs the money for? I told her as I poured 2 cups of coffee. Louise looked at me with those wise eyes that come from raising 5 children. Helen, do you know how many times you've given Jessica money in the last 5 years? Well, several times. But she's my daughter. Do you know how many times she's asked how your health is? How many times she's invited you over for dinner? How many times she has come to visit without asking for anything? The questions hung in the air like storm clouds. I tried to remember the last time Jessica had come over just to talk, just to be with me. I couldn't think of a single instance. She's just very busy with the kids. Helen, my dear, do you think if you woke up tomorrow without a penny to your name, Jessica would still visit you? That night, lying in my queen-sized bed that now felt far too big, I hugged my husband's pillow and cried until I had no tears left. I cried for the 5-year-old girl who used to tell me, "Mommy, I love you to the moon and back." I cried for the teenager who would hug me when her heart was broken. I cried for the woman she had become, who no longer saw me as a person, only as a provider. But most of all, I cried for myself, for Helen Peterson, who had slowly disappeared behind the role of mom until she had become a shadow of her own needs and dreams. A week later, Jessica's silence became deafening. Not a call, not a text, not even a message to ask if I was still alive. It was as if she had pressed a delete button and I had vanished from her list of important contacts. Meanwhile, I kept waking up every morning with the foolish hope that my phone would light up with her name. On Friday afternoon, while I was buying tomatoes at the Pasadena Farmers Market, I ran into Rose, Jessica's godmother. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, but something in her expression made a strange pit form in my stomach. "Helen, so good to see you. Hey, congratulations on Jessica's new business. It looks like she's doing really well." I froze between the vegetable stalls, a bag of tomatoes in one hand and my wallet in the other. "What business, Rose?" "Oh, you didn't know? Jessica opened a boutique on Melrose Avenue. Very chic, by the way. I went with my daughter last week and we were fascinated. The dresses are incredibly expensive, but they look like very high quality." My world started to tilt. A boutique on Melrose Avenue, one of the trendiest, most expensive areas in the city. The urgent $20,000 she had asked for wasn't for an emergency. It was for her business, and she hadn't even had the decency to tell me. And, is it doing well? Absolutely. She says she already has some very important clients. She even hired 2 employees. It looks like the investment was worth it. I arrived home with my legs shaking. I sat in my favorite armchair in the living room, surrounded by the same furniture I had bought with so much effort years ago, and dialed Jessica's number. It rang 4 times before she answered. "What's up, Mom?" "Jessica, I ran into Rose at the market. She told me about your boutique." Silence. A long, heavy silence that felt like a confession. "Oh, right. I forgot to mention it to you." "You forgot?" "Jessica, you asked me for $20,000 telling me it was urgent. You didn't tell me it was for a business. And what does it matter what it was for?" In the end, I didn't give it to you, right? My mother-in-law understood it was an opportunity. But honey, why didn't you just tell me the truth? I might have what? Given me a lecture on how risky businesses are? Told me I should save the money instead? Please, Mom. I know your sermons by heart. It hurt more than a slap. When had I become someone dreams had to be hidden from? When had my life experience turned into sermons to be avoided? I just wanted to be a part of your life, Jessica. I'm your mother. Oh, Mom, stop. I don't need you to be a part of everything. I'm an adult now. And she hung up again. That night, my grandkids came to stay with me because Jessica had an important meeting for her boutique. Sam, 8, and Sophie, 5, filled my house with a joyful noise I was no longer used to. As I made them quesadillas for dinner, Sam wrapped his arms around my waist. Grandma, why does Mommy say you've been acting weird lately? The hand holding the spatula froze. What does your mom say, sweetie? That you get mad about everything and that you always want to know things that are none of your business. She also told Dad that you're becoming a real downer. Every word was like a nail being hammered into my chest. Jessica had been talking about me with her husband, painting me as a nosy, problematic mother, in front of my grandchildren. And what else did she say, Sam? That you're getting really old and that's why you act like that. But I don't think you're old, Grandma. You make the best quesadillas in the world. I knelt to hug him, hiding the tears that escaped without permission. My 8-year-old grandson had more consideration for my feelings than my own daughter. After putting the kids to bed, I stayed up in the kitchen, drinking chamomile tea and trying to understand when this had all started. When had Jessica stopped seeing me as her mother and started seeing me as a nuisance? When had my questions about her life become nosiness instead of love? On Saturday morning, while the kids were watching cartoons, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years: check Jessica's social media. I created an Instagram account just so I could see her posts. What I found broke my soul into pieces. Photo after photo of her new boutique. Making dreams come true, she wrote on an image where she was cutting a golden ribbon at the grand opening. Thanks to everyone who believed in this project. In another photo, she was hugging her mother-in-law, my second mom, always supporting me in everything. And one more, with her employees. My work team, the best allies to make this dream grow. Not a single mention of me. Not one photo with me. It was as if I didn't exist in her life of success and achievement. As if the years of unconditional support had been erased from her personal history. But what hurt the most was a post from 3 days prior. A photo of her with the kids at a fancy restaurant, smiling, celebrating the business's first successes with the family. Thank you, universe, for so much. The kids who were supposedly with me because she had work had been having dinner at a place that cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. She had lied to me. She didn't have a work meeting. She simply didn't want to spend time with me. On Sunday, when Jessica came to pick up the kids, I decided to confront her. The children ran to hug her while I stood at the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. Jessica, can we talk for a moment? Make it quick, Mom. I have things to do. I saw your Instagram photos from the restaurant where you took the kids on Friday. Her face changed completely. For the first time in a long time, I saw her look nervous. Are you spying on me on social media? You lied to me. You told me you had work and you took the kids out to dinner. So? I can't take my kids to dinner? Is that going to bother you now too? It doesn't bother me that you take them to dinner, Jessica. It bothers me that you lied to me. It bothers me that you'd rather make up excuses than tell me you don't want to spend time with me. Oh, Mom, here you go with your drama. She turned to the kids. Let's go. Drama? Asking you why you lie to me is drama? Jessica stopped dead in her tracks and turned to me with a look I had never seen before. Cold. Empty. Full of a contempt that chilled me to the bone. You know what, Mom? Yes, I lied. Because I can't stand your questions anymore, your victim faces, your constant sighing. Every time I come here, I feel like you're suffocating me. You're not the fun mom you were when I was a kid. Now you're just a bitter old woman who complains about everything. The words hit me like bullets. Sam and Sophie stood frozen by the door, watching their mother destroy their grandmother with words they couldn't understand but could certainly feel. Jessica, I just what? Just want to smother me? because that's what you do. You suffocate me with your constant need for attention." She left, taking the children with her, leaving me standing in my own doorway like a stranger in my own life. Sam turned back to wave goodbye, confused by a tension he couldn't grasp. That night, for the first time in my life, I wondered if Jessica was right, if I had become a burden, if my mother's love had turned into something toxic that smothered instead of nurtured. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, under the harsh light of the bulb that's been flickering for months, and I saw a 64-year-old woman who no longer knew who she was beyond being a mother. A woman who had given so much of herself that there was nothing original left, nothing of her own, nothing worth keeping. 3 weeks passed with no news from Jessica. 3 weeks of absolute silence that felt like 3 years. I continued my daily routine like a robot. Wake up at 6, take my pills, make coffee for 1, check my phone for a message that never arrived. The mornings had become so quiet I could hear the ticking of the wall clock I inherited from my mother, marking every second of my loneliness. On Wednesday afternoon, as I was organizing my medications into the weekly pill box, the phone rang. My heart leaped with hope, thinking it was Jessica, but the voice I heard on the other end turned my blood cold. "Mrs. Helen Peterson?" "Yes, this is she. This is Claudia Fernandez from Community Federal Bank. I need to inform you that your daughter, Jessica, came in this morning with documents to request access to your savings account, alleging that you are experiencing mental health issues and that she needs to take over your finances." The world caved in. The pill box slipped from my hands, and the colorful capsules scattered across the kitchen floor like confetti for a party no one had planned. "I'm sorry. What did you say?" "She presented a medical document that supposedly states you have early-onset dementia and can no longer manage your own resources. She wanted authorization to become your legal representative." The words floated in my head, but I couldn't fully process them. Jessica had used my medical diagnosis, which I hadn't even been able to fully tell her about, to try to seize my savings. "And what did you tell her?" "Of course, we didn't proceed without speaking to you first. Besides, the document seemed suspicious to us. Did you authorize this transaction?" "No, I didn't authorize anything." "In that case, Mrs. Peterson, I recommend you come to the bank tomorrow to review the security on your account, and it might be a good idea to consider filing a report." I hung up the phone with trembling hands. I sat on the kitchen floor, among the scattered pills, and cried like I hadn't cried since my husband's death. But these weren't tears of simple grief. They were tears of betrayal, of disbelief, of an anger that was beginning to brew in a very deep part of my chest. My own daughter had tried to rob me. It wasn't an exaggeration. It wasn't my drama. Jessica had forged medical documents to try to get her hands on my life savings. The next day, I arrived at the bank with my neighbor Louise, who insisted on accompanying me. Claudia Fernandez turned out to be a middle-aged woman with glasses and a serious but kind expression. She showed us copies of the documents Jessica had presented. "Here is the supposed medical certificate stating that you can no longer make financial decisions for yourself." I examined the document carefully. It was a rather convincing forgery, but something was off. The date on the certificate was from last month, but the doctor who had supposedly signed it had died 2 years ago. I knew because he had been my late husband's cardiologist. "This doctor passed away some time ago," I told her. "Exactly. That's why it seemed suspicious. Furthermore, your daughter became very nervous when we asked for additional identification and left, saying she would return later with more documents." Louise squeezed my hand as I tried to process what was happening. Not only had Jessica forged medical documents, but she had used a dead doctor's name to do it. The level of premeditation, of coldness, of contempt for me was something my mother's mind couldn't fully comprehend. What can I do to protect my money? I recommend you change all your account numbers, place additional security holds on any transactions, and definitely file a police report. This is fraud, Mrs. Peterson. That afternoon, at the police station in Pasadena, I sat at a scratched metal desk to give my statement. The officer who took my report was a young man who listened patiently as I explained the situation. "Are you sure you want to proceed with the report, ma'am?" "It's your daughter." "That's precisely why, officer. Because she is my daughter, and this can't be swept under the rug." When I got home, the phone was ringing. It was Jessica. "Mom, we need to talk. Now." Her voice sounded different. Nervous. Desperate. I don't think we have anything left to talk about, Jessica. Don't hang up. I know you went to the bank. I know you talked to them. Yes. And I know you forged medical documents to try to rob me. Silence. A silence that lasted so long I thought she had hung up. It's not robbing. You're my mom. It's money that's going to be mine someday anyway. The coldness of those words chilled my blood. Jessica had not only tried to rob me, she believed she had the right to do it. That money is the product of my work, Jessica. Of my sacrifices. It is not yours. What sacrifices are you talking about? You've never done anything important in your life. Just worked in a textile factory and kept a house. Anyone can do that. There it was. The naked truth of what Jessica thought of me. My entire life of effort. Of waking up at 5 in the morning to get to work on time. Of sewing late into the night to earn a few extra dollars. Of giving up my own dreams so she could achieve hers. All of it was nothing important to her. That work you look down on is what paid for your education, your clothes, your food for 20 years. And I never asked you to. You decided to have me. I didn't choose to be born. The words hit me like punches. When had my daughter become this cruel person, incapable of recognizing the love she had received? When had she learned to use my sacrifices as something I had chosen to do for my own pleasure, without acknowledgement or gratitude? Jessica, I filed a report with the police. Forging documents is a crime. You reported me? Your own daughter? I reported a person who tried to rob me using forged documents. The fact that it's my daughter makes it hurt more, not less. You're crazy, Mom. Completely crazy. And I'm going to fix this. I'm going to prove that you really are losing your mind and that you need someone to take care of you. There's nothing left to fix, Jessica. You no longer have access to my accounts. I no longer trust you. And I will no longer allow you to treat me as if I were your enemy. You know what? Fine. I hope you enjoy your old age alone, bitter, and abandoned. Because that's what you're going to get. Let's see who's going to take care of you when you really need help. And she hung up for the last time. I stood there with the phone in my hand, but for the first time in weeks, I didn't cry. Something had shifted inside me during that conversation. The little girl I had raised, the daughter I had loved unconditionally, no longer existed. In her place was a stranger who saw me as an obstacle to getting money she believed she deserved simply for being born. That night, I pulled an old suitcase that had belonged to my mother from my closet. I placed it on the bed and stared at it for a long time. It was time to make a decision I never thought I would have to make. If Jessica wanted me to be alone, I was going to give her that wish. But it would be a solitude of my own choosing, on my own terms, with my dignity intact and my money protected. For the first time in months, I slept through the night without waking up. The next morning, I awoke with a mental clarity I hadn't felt in years. It was as if my brain had spent the night reorganizing drawers, dusting off the accumulated grime of decades of being Jessica's mom, and remembering who Helen Peterson was before she became a mother. I got up without rushing, made my coffee as usual, but this time I sat in the backyard to drink it while I looked at my plants. The bougainvillea I had planted 10 years ago had grown so much it now covered almost the entire fence. I had watched it grow day by day, but somehow, I had never really stopped to admire how beautiful it had become. For the first time in months, I didn't check my phone waiting for a text from Jessica. At 9 in the morning, I called my job. I had been taking personal days and time off to deal with this whole situation, but it was time to make a more definitive decision. Mr. Herrera, this is Helen Peterson calling. I'd like to request my final paycheck. You're resigning, Helen? But you've been with us for 15 years. Exactly. 15 years is long enough to know when it's time for a change. After hanging up, I dialed my sister Sarah's number in Phoenix. We hadn't spoken in months because I was always too absorbed in my problems with Jessica to maintain other relationships. Helen? What a surprise. How are you, sis? I'm different, Sarah. I need to tell you some things. I told her everything. The boutique, the forged documents, the cruel words, the police report. Sarah listened without interrupting, and when I finished, her response was as direct as it had always been. It's about time, Helen. It's about time you opened your eyes. You're not going to tell me I'm a bad mother for reporting my own daughter? I'm going to tell you that you're finally a brave woman. Jessica isn't a child, Helen. She's a grown woman who made adult decisions. And the consequences have to be adult ones, too. That afternoon, I went to the community center in Pasadena, where they offered classes in various crafts. For years, I had wanted to take a professional pastry course, but there was always some emergency of Jessica's that prevented me from spending money on myself. When do the French pastry classes start? I asked the receptionist. Next week. It's a 6-month course, 3 days a week. Are you interested in signing up? Yes, I definitely am. As I filled out the registration form, I felt a strange excitement in my chest. How many years had it been since I had done something completely for myself? How long had it been since the last time I signed up for something that brought me joy instead of solving someone else's life? On Friday morning, my neighbor Louise arrived with 2 cups of coffee and a worried look on her face. Helen, I saw Jessica at the supermarket yesterday. She looked very upset. She asked me if I knew where you were because you're not answering her calls. I'm not answering because I have nothing to say to her. She also asked if I knew anything about criminal defense attorneys. I think she's been contacted about the forged documents. A very small part of me felt a pang of motherly concern, but it was a part that was getting smaller and smaller, overshadowed by something larger that was beginning to grow: self-respect. Sarah told me I should come visit her in Phoenix for a few weeks, to get away, see other places. And are you going to go? I'm seriously thinking about it. Louise looked at me with a smile I hadn't seen on her face in months. Helen, you look different. I don't know how to explain it, but you look more like you. That afternoon, I received a call I wasn't expecting. It was Jessica's husband, Rob. Helen, I'm sorry to bother you. I know things are difficult with Jessica, but I need to talk to you. Go on, Rob. Jessica is a wreck. She hasn't slept well since the incident at the bank. She says you're going to put her in jail. Jessica got herself into trouble by forging documents, Rob. I was just protecting my assets. I know, Helen, and I don't blame you. But the kids are asking why their grandma doesn't come to see them anymore. Sam cries at night, asking if he did something wrong. That did hurt. My grandchildren were not to blame for their mother's mistakes. Do the kids know what happened? They only know that you and Jessica had a big fight. Sam says he wants to visit you, but Jessica says he can't because you're mad at them. I have never been mad at the children, Rob. I'm disappointed in their mother, but they are not to blame for anything. Could you see them sometime? Without Jessica necessarily knowing, I think it would be good for them, and for you too. I thought about it before answering. Was it right to see my grandchildren behind their mother's back? Or was it more right to prevent Jessica from using them as emotional currency to manipulate me? You can bring them to Brookside Park on Sunday at 5 in the afternoon, just for an hour. Sunday arrived faster than I expected. I got ready with special care, putting on a blue dress I hadn't worn in months, and even applying a soft coral lipstick I had bought but never dared to use. When I saw Sam and Sophie running towards me in the park, shouting, "Grandma Helen," I felt something in my chest thaw. I hugged them with a strength I didn't know I had, inhaling the scent of Sophie's apple shampoo and feeling Sam's strong little arms around my neck. "Why don't you come to our house anymore, Grandma?" Sophie asked, with those enormous eyes she had inherited from my family. "Sometimes grown-ups have problems to solve, my love, but that doesn't mean I don't love you. Are you mad at my mom?" Sam's direct question caught me off guard. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that his mother tried to steal from his grandmother without destroying the image he has of her? "I'm not mad, Sam. I'm sad because your mom and I aren't understanding each other right now. But that has nothing to do with you two. Are you going to come back?" "I don't know, sweetie. But you will always be able to come visit me whenever you want." We spent the hour playing on the swings, buying popsicles, and I told them about my pastry classes that were starting next week. For the first time in months, I laughed without forcing a smile. When Rob came to pick them up, Sam hugged me tight and whispered in my ear, "Grandma, Mom cries a lot at night. She says you don't love her anymore. I will always love your mom, Sam. But sometimes loving someone means telling them no when they're doing something wrong." That night, after the visit with my grandchildren, I sat in my living room with a new notebook I had bought that week. On the first page, I wrote, "Things I want to do now that I'm free." The list began to grow. Finish the pastry classes. Visit Sarah in Phoenix Travel, somewhere I've never been. Learn how to use a computer, plant a vegetable garden in the yard. Read all the books I had put off. For the first time in decades, I was making plans that didn't involve solving anyone else's life but my own. It was a strange, but incredibly liberating feeling. The French pastry classes became the refuge I never knew I needed. 3 times a week, in a classroom that smelled of vanilla and butter, I discovered I had hands capable of creating beautiful things. The instructor, a 60-year-old Frenchman named Louis who had lived in California for decades, treated me like an artist instead of a lost grandmother. Madame Helene, your macarons have the perfect balance. You have a natural gift for this. Every "well done" from that man filled me with a satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. It was recognition for something I had achieved, not for something I had given or sacrificed for someone else. One afternoon, after mastering the technique of fondant, my sister Sarah showed up as a surprise from Phoenix. My younger sister, who had always been more practical than me, studied me with curious eyes as she watched me put away my baking tools. "You look different, Helen. You look, how can I put it? Alive. I feel alive, Sarah, for the first time in years. So what are you going to do with all that money you have saved? Are you just going to wait for Jessica to repent and come back for it?" The question caught me off guard. For weeks, I had been so focused on protecting my savings that I hadn't thought about what to do with them. I hadn't thought about that. Well, I have. Remember Henry Erickson? My friend who's a financial advisor. Vaguely. He told me something interesting. He says there are ways to make money work for you instead of you working for money. Safe investments that can multiply what you have. The idea was both terrifying and exciting. All my life, I had been conservative with money, metaphorically keeping it under the mattress. But what if instead of just protecting it, I made it grow? Do you think it's safe? Helen, what's safer? Leaving the money there for Jessica to keep trying to get her hands on it? Or putting it to work for you while you live your life? 2 days later, I was sitting in a sleek office in Century City, across from Henry Erickson, a man in his 40s with an impeccable suit and an honest smile. "Mrs. Peterson, from what Sarah tells me, you have about $250,000 in savings, plus the value of your home. Is that correct?" "Yes, more or less. What are your goals? What do you want to achieve with this money?" The question made me think. What did I want? For years, my only goal had been to have enough for Jessica's emergencies. Now that that was no longer a concern, I realized I had never thought about my own financial goals. I want to be able to travel without worrying about money. I want to take classes in whatever I feel like. I want to live without the fear of running out of resources. Perfect. We're going to design a strategy that will allow you to grow your assets while maintaining liquidity for your personal expenses. Henry explained concepts that sounded like a foreign language. Mutual funds, treasury bills, blue chip stocks, portfolio diversification. But he did it with patience, drawing simple charts and using examples I could understand. With a conservative but smart strategy, in a year we could be looking at a growth of 15 to 20%. That would mean having between $287,000 and $300,000 without touching the initial capital. The figures danced in my head. For the first time in my life, money would work for me instead of me working desperately to get it. And what if I need the money for an emergency? Part of the strategy includes maintaining a liquid reserve. We never invest everything. You will always have immediate access to a portion of your funds. I signed the papers that same afternoon. It was a strange feeling, as if I were signing a contract with a future version of myself, a Helen who would have more resources, more options, more freedom. Leaving the office, instead of going straight home, I stopped at a travel agency I had seen 1,000 times but never had the courage to enter. "Good afternoon. How can I help you?" "I'd like some information on trips to Paris." The words came out of my mouth before my brain had even planned them. Paris? Where had that idea come from? Excellent choice. When were you thinking of traveling? In about 6 months. Is that possible? Of course. We have some great packages for that time of year. Are you traveling alone? Yes, I'm traveling alone. Saying those words filled me with a mixture of terror and euphoria. Helen Peterson, 64, was going to travel to Paris alone. The same woman who had needed her daughter's permission to even buy new shoes. The agent, a young woman with a bright smile, showed me pictures of Parisian hotels, museums, cafes. She told me about the Louvre, the Eiffel Tower, the boat tours on the Seine. Do you speak French? I'm learning French pastry. I suppose I could learn some basic phrases. Perfect. I can recommend some apps for learning basic French. I left the agency with a brochure full of dreams and a promise to return in 2 weeks to set the exact dates. That night, when I got home, there were 3 missed calls from Jessica. I listened to the voicemails with a calmness that surprised me. Mom, we need to talk. This has gotten out of hand. Mom, the lawyer says I could face serious charges if you don't drop the complaint. Please call me. Mom, I know you're angry, but think about your grandchildren. Do you really want them to grow up knowing their grandmother put their mom in jail? The last message angered me deeply. Once again, Jessica was using the children as an emotional shield, manipulating the situation to make me feel guilty for protecting myself from her attempted theft. I dialed her number for the first time in weeks. Mom? Thank God you called. We need to… Jessica, I'm going to say this only once. I didn't put anyone in jail. You got yourself into trouble by trying to forge medical documents to steal from me. The consequences of those actions are yours, not mine. But Mom, I'm not finished. Second, do not use my grandchildren to manipulate me. They have nothing to do with this. And it is your responsibility as a mother to explain the situation to them without blaming me for your mistakes. When did you become so cold, Mom? I'm not cold, Jessica. I've learned to value myself. I've learned that loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt me. So now what? You're going to live alone and bitter for the rest of your life? I'm going to live free for the rest of my life. Free to make my own decisions. Free to spend my money on what makes me happy. Free to respect myself. This is ridiculous. You're a 64-year-old woman. What are you going to do with your life? I'm going to travel to Paris, Jessica. I'm going to see the world. I'm going to do things I always wanted to do but postponed to take care of others. The silence on the other end of the line was long and uncomfortable. Paris? With what money? With my money. The money I earned working. The money I saved for years. The money you tried to steal from me. You're insane. I'm sane for the first time in years. And I hung up. That night, I opened a bottle of wine I had been saving for a special occasion that never came. I poured myself a glass, sat in my yard under the stars, and made a toast to myself. To you, Helen Peterson. To your new life. The wine tasted like freedom. 3 months later, my life was unrecognizable. The investments I had made with Henry had exceeded all expectations. The $250,000 had turned into $385,000, and the advisor assured me we were on track to hit $500,000 in less than 2 years if we maintained the strategy. But more important than the numbers was what had happened to me. I had enrolled in basic French classes at the Alliance Française in Pasadena. 3 times a week, I sat among students who could have been my grandchildren and learned to pronounce words that sounded like music. Bonjour, je m'appelle Hélène, I would repeat in front of the mirror every morning, and each time, I liked the sound of it more. My house had also changed. I hired a painter to change the faded salmon pink walls to a soft yellow that made everything look brighter. I bought new plants for the yard, remodeled the kitchen with the help of a small loan I could easily pay off thanks to the returns on my investment portfolio. For the first time in decades, my home felt like my home, not a museum of memories of the family that once was. One afternoon in September, while I was practicing French in my renovated garden, Louise came over with a look of urgent gossip. Helen, have you heard about Jessica? What about Jessica? She closed the boutique. Apparently, it wasn't doing well at all, and she couldn't make rent. I felt a small pang of something I wasn't sure was motherly concern or simple curiosity. I hadn't heard anything directly from her in 3 months, only the occasional reports that came through Rob when he brought the kids to the park. And what is she going to do? I don't know that. But Rob looked very worried when he told me. He says Jessica has been very depressed since the business closed. That night, for the first time in a long time, I thought seriously about Jessica, not with the constant anguish that had been my companion for years, but with the serenity of someone observing from a distance. I wondered if she had learned anything from this experience, if perhaps the failure of her boutique had made her reflect on the decisions she had made. But I didn't call her. It wasn't my responsibility to rescue her from the consequences of her actions. On Friday, I received a call I wasn't expecting. It was Sam, my grandson. "Grandma, can you come to the house? My mom is really sad, and she says you're the only one who can help her." My heart sank. Sam was only 8. He shouldn't be burdened with his mother's emotional problems. "Where are you calling from, sweetie?" "From the house phone. Mom is in her room crying and Dad had to go to work." "And Sophie?" "She's watching TV. She doesn't understand why Mom is crying so much." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. For 3 months, I had carefully built a new life, an identity separate from being the official fixer of Jessica's problems. But I couldn't ignore the fact that my grandchildren were living with the consequences of their mother's emotional crisis. "Sam, tell your mom that if she wants to talk to me, she can call me herself. But it has to be a conversation between adults, with respect. Do you understand?" "Yes, Grandma." "Are you okay?" "I'm doing great, my love, and you two are going to be okay too." 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Jessica, and her voice was shattered. "Mom, can we meet?" "That depends. Why do you want to see me, Jessica?" I need to apologize to you. For real. Not to ask for money or anything like that. Just to apologize." There was something in her tone that sounded different. It wasn't the usual arrogance, nor the calculated manipulation. She sounded genuinely broken. "We can meet at the cafe by Brookside Park tomorrow at 4. "Thank you, Mom. Really, thank you." The next day, I arrived at our meeting 10 minutes early. I had dressed with care. A navy blue dress I had bought the previous week, comfortable yet elegant shoes, my hair freshly cut at a salon I had never dared to enter before because it seemed too expensive. Jessica arrived on time, but the woman I saw was not the same one who had argued with me 3 months ago. She looked thinner, with deep dark circles under her eyes, her hair lacking the professional styling she was used to. But more than her physical appearance, what struck me most was her posture, the slumped shoulders of someone who had been defeated by life. "Mom, thank you for coming. Tell me why you wanted to see me, Jessica." She sat across from me, and for the first time in years, she didn't avoid my gaze. "I want to apologize. For everything. For the fake documents. For the horrible things I said to you. For treating you like you were my enemy when you were never anything but a mother who loved me." The words hung in the air between us. I waited for her to continue because something told me she needed to say more. "The business failed, Mom. Not because there weren't customers, but because I didn't know what I was doing. I had never run a real business before. I spent more than I earned. I didn't keep proper records. I didn't understand taxes or suppliers." She took a sip of her coffee before continuing. "And when everything started to go wrong, all I could think about was how you had always managed money so well. How you had managed to save so much working at jobs I looked down on. I realized that my whole life, I had underestimated how smart you are." I felt something stir in my chest, but it wasn't the immediate impulse to comfort her that I would have felt before. It was something more measured, more considered. "And that's why you tried to forge documents to access my accounts?" "Because I was desperate and because I thought I was entitled to that money. I thought that because I was your daughter, everything you had was automatically mine too. And what do you think now?" "Now I think I'm a selfish person who almost destroyed the relationship with the only person who loved me unconditionally my entire life." Tears began to stream down her cheeks, but they weren't the manipulative tears I had seen so many times before. They were the tears of a grown woman who finally understood the weight of her actions. "Mom, I'm not asking you to forgive me immediately. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I want you to know that I've been going to therapy, that I'm trying to understand why I became such a cruel person to you." "Therapy?" "Rob told me that if I didn't get professional help, he was going to take the kids. He said he couldn't let them grow up watching how I treated their grandmother." That surprised me. Rob had always been a quiet man, but apparently he had decided to take a firm stand. "And what have you discovered in therapy?" "That for years I saw you as an extension of myself instead of as a whole person. That I never learned to value your sacrifices because I took them for granted. That I confused your unconditional love with unconditional availability. She wiped her tears with a napkin before continuing. The therapist gave me a horrible exercise. She asked me to write down everything I could remember that you had done for me, and then everything I had done for you. The first list took up 4 pages. The second barely filled half a page. Jessica, let me finish, please. I also realized that when I told you that you'd never done anything important in your life, I was talking about myself, because I've never done anything truly important. I've never created something of value. I've never cared for anyone the way you cared for me. I've never sacrificed my own desires for someone else's well-being. We sat in silence for several minutes. I looked at my daughter, because despite everything, she was still my daughter, and for the first time in years, I saw her as a complete human being, with flaws and pain and the capacity for growth. What do you want from me now, Jessica? A chance to get to know you again. To learn how to be your daughter in a healthy way. For my children to have a grandmother without it meaning I use or hurt you. And what if I don't want to be the mother I was before? What if I don't want to rescue you or solve your problems anymore? Then I'm going to learn to respect that. Because I'd rather have a mom with clear boundaries than no mom at all. For the first time in our conversation, I smiled. Okay, then let's start over. But with different rules this time. 6 months after that conversation in the coffee shop, I was standing at LAX with a new suitcase, a passport that smelled of adventure, and a heart that was beating with excitement instead of anxiety. Paris was waiting for me on the other side of the ocean, but the most important journey had already been made. The journey back to myself. My portfolio had grown to over $750,000. Henry had been right about the investments, but more importantly, he had been right about something he told me at the beginning. Money is a tool for freedom, Mrs. Peterson, and you deserve to be free. Jessica and I had built an entirely new relationship. I was no longer the mother who solved all her problems, nor was she the daughter who saw me as an unlimited resource. We met once a week in neutral places, talked about our lives without either of us being emotionally dependent on the other. She had gotten a job at a marketing firm, starting from the bottom, learning what it meant to earn her own money without having anyone else to fall back on. The kids came to visit me every other weekend, and for the first time in years, those visits were pure joy without any obligation. The plane took off at 10 at night. As I watched the lights of my city shrink below me, I thought about everything I had left behind and everything that awaited me. It wasn't just a trip to Paris. It was my personal declaration that Helen Peterson existed beyond being a mother, beyond being a provider, beyond being the solution to other people's problems. During the 12-hour flight, I couldn't sleep from the excitement. I read my Paris guidebook for the 3rd time, practiced French phrases, and wrote in the journal I had started keeping since my transformation began. Today, I start living the life that was always waiting for me. I wrote somewhere over the Atlantic, and it turns out it's more beautiful than I ever imagined. Paris was exactly what I had dreamed of, and nothing like what I had expected. I stayed in a small hotel near the Latin Quarter, with windows that opened onto a cobblestone street, where people seemed to walk with more purpose but less hurry than in California. My first morning, I woke up before dawn due to the time difference. Instead of staying in bed waiting for a decent hour, I got dressed and went for a walk through the waking streets. I found a small bakery where an old man smiled at me when I said, "Bonjour," with my clearly audible American accent. "Are you American?" he asked. "Yes, from California." "First time in Paris?" "Yes, my first time." He gave me an extra croissant as a welcome gift. And for the first time in decades, I accepted something for free without feeling guilty or obligated to give something in return. I spent 5 days exploring the city like a teenager on her first solo trip. I visited the Louvre and cried in front of the Mona Lisa, not because of the painting, but because I was there, because I had reached a point in my life where I could afford such a luxury. I sat in cafes watching people go by, wrote postcards I never sent because I had no one to send them to, and I realized that was perfectly okay. I went up the Eiffel Tower at sunset, and when I reached the top, I shouted into the Parisian sky, "I did it! Helen Peterson did it!" A French couple nearby looked at me with curiosity and then with a smile. The man approached and asked in basic English if I was celebrating something special. "I'm celebrating my new life," I replied in my imperfect English mixed with French. I'm celebrating the discovery that it's never too late to start over. They toasted with me, using champagne they had brought for their own celebration. It turned out they were celebrating their 30th wedding anniversary. "And what exactly are you celebrating?" the woman asked me in surprisingly good English. "My first anniversary of choosing myself." On my last day in Paris, I went into an old bookstore near Notre Dame. Among the shelves filled with books in languages I didn't fully understand, I found a small book of poems in English. It was a bilingual French-English edition of poems about new beginnings. One of the poems spoke of women who discover their strength after 60, about second youths that arrive when one learns to let go of what no longer serves them. I bought it, and that night, at my last dinner in Paris, I read that poem while sipping red wine and watching Parisian life flow by. The return to California was different from the trip out. It wasn't the excited escape into the unknown, but the conscious return of someone who knew she had changed forever. Jessica and the kids were waiting for me at the airport. For the first time in years, my daughter's hug felt genuine, with no ulterior motives, no hidden agenda. "How was it, Mom?" "It was perfect, honey. Perfect." Sam hugged my legs with that strength only children have when they've truly missed someone. "Grandma, did you bring us anything from Paris?" "I brought you something better than souvenirs," I told them. "I brought you stories." During the car ride home, I told them about the streets of Paris, about the bakery where I got a free croissant, about the Eiffel Tower at sunset. Jessica listened with an attentiveness I hadn't felt from her in years. "Mom, you look different." "I feel different. I feel like Helen, not just your mom." "And is that okay?" "That's perfect, Jessica. It's the best thing that's happened to me in decades." That night, in my renovated house, with my plants blooming in the yard, I opened a bottle of French wine I had brought back from Paris. I poured a glass and went out to the garden where the bougainvillea I had planted years ago now covered the entire fence like a cascade of fuchsia flowers. I took out my phone and checked my bank account for the first time in a week. The portfolio, worth over $750,000, was there, growing quietly while I lived my life. It was no longer just saved money. It was materialized freedom. It was quantified independence. It was the power to choose how I wanted to live every day I had left. I dialed Sarah's number in Phoenix. "How was Paris, sis?" "Sarah, it was transformative. But you know what the most beautiful part of all this is?" "What?" "That Paris was wonderful, but coming back to my own life is also wonderful. For the first time in my life, I have a life of my own that I'm happy to return to." "Oh, Helen, you make me want to cry with joy." "Don't cry, Sarah. Better yet, pack a suitcase. We're going on the next adventure together." After hanging up, I stayed in the garden late into the night, thinking about the journey I had taken. From that morning when Jessica asked me for $20,000 without a thought for my medical diagnosis, to this night where I had financial security, a life of my own, a healthy relationship with my daughter, and future plans that excited rather than scared me. The cognitive decline I had been diagnosed with was still there, but it was no longer a death sentence. It was simply a medical condition that I monitored regularly, without allowing it to define who I was or what I could do with my life. I got up from the rocking chair and went inside. On my desk, I had a new list. Helen's Next Dreams. Italy was at the top. Learning to play the piano was second. Maybe writing a book about my experience was third. For the first time in my life, the future looked like an open door instead of a dead end. Before going to bed, I wrote the last entry of the day in my journal. "Dear Helen of the past, thank you for having the courage to let go of what no longer served you. Dear Helen of the future, I await you with excitement. And dear Helen of the present, you are enough, you are valuable, and you deserve all the happiness you are creating for yourself." At 64, I had finally learned the most important lesson of my life. It's never too late to truly start living. Have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life instead of your own? Do you know someone who has lost themselves by caring so much for others? If this story touched your heart, share it in the comments. Tell me if you've experienced something similar, or if you know someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to choose yourself. If this story inspired you, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach those who need to hear them most. Because sometimes, One story can be the push someone needs to start their own transformation.